You know what it feels like. That moment when someone talks over you mid-sentence, when they dismiss your opinion without a second thought, when they treat your time like it's worth nothing, and you just stand there, smiling politely, because you were raised to be kind. You were taught to be the bigger person. But here's what Jung discovered that nobody told you. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's an open invitation for people to walk all over you. Jung spent decades studying why certain people command instant respect while others get treated like doormats, even when they're equally intelligent and capable. And what he found was disturbing. There's a specific psychological switch in the human mind. When you flip it, people's entire behavior toward you changes overnight. They stop interrupting. They stop dismissing you. They start weighing their words carefully before speaking to you. And the most fascinating part? You don't have to say a single aggressive word to make this happen. But here's the twist that makes psychologists uncomfortable. The people who get disrespected the most are often the kindest souls. And that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern Jung identified in his clinical practice. He discovered that being harmless is not the same thing as being good. In fact, being completely harmless makes you psychologically invisible. People sense it on an unconscious level, and they treat you accordingly. So what exactly did Jung find that flips this switch? What's the one thing you can do that transforms how people treat you? That's what we're diving into today. Because once you understand this mechanism, you'll never be disrespected the same way again. Let me paint you a picture of the typical nice person. You probably know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. They apologize constantly, even when they've done nothing wrong. They laugh nervously when someone makes them uncomfortable. They give up their seat, their time, their energy, without anyone even asking. They pride themselves on never causing conflict. Society tells us this is virtue. Jung discovered it's actually a pathology. He called it the persona, the mask you wear in public. And for nice people, that mask has become their prison. They've been so well trained to be polite, to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable, that they've forgotten something crucial. They've forgotten that real respect doesn't come from being pleasant. It comes from being capable of unpleasantness, but choosing restraint. Here's the part that changed Jung's entire understanding of human nature. When he analyzed why people disrespect the chronically nice, he expected to find that disrespectful people were simply cruel or malicious. But that's not what he discovered. The truth was far more disturbing. People disrespect you not because they're inherently mean. They disrespect you because on a deep, unconscious level, they sense that you're harmless. And harmless doesn't inspire respect in the human psyche. It inspires casual disregard. Think about it. When you interact with someone who you know will accept any behavior, who will forgive anything, who will never push back, something shifts in your brain. You stop measuring your words. You stop considering their feelings as carefully. Not because you're a bad person, but because the psychological cost of disrespecting them is zero. They've taught you through their patterns that there are no consequences. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes critical. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've been taught to repress. Your anger, your selfishness, your capacity for cruelty, your ability to say no. Nice people have massive shadows because they've spent their entire lives pushing down these natural human qualities. They tell themselves, I'm not like those aggressive people. I'm kind. I'm understanding. But here's what Jung discovered that terrifies most people. To be truly respected, you must integrate your shadow. You must become dangerous, but disciplined. There's a massive difference between a weak person and a meek person. A weak person cannot hurt anyone, even if they wanted to. A meek person could destroy you if they chose to, but they keep that power sheathed like a sword. People can sense this difference on a primal level. Jung used a powerful metaphor. He said the most respected individuals are those who carry a sword, but rarely draw it. Everyone knows the sword is there. Everyone knows this person is capable of cutting you down if necessary. But they also know this person has the self-control not to use that power carelessly. That combination, capability plus restraint, is what commands genuine respect. When you're only capable of niceness, when you have no sword at all, people treat you accordingly. They don't respect your boundaries because you don't have any. They don't value your time because you've never shown that your time has value. They don't consider your feelings because you've trained them that your feelings are always secondary to keeping the peace. Jung observed something fascinating in his practice when chronically nice people finally started integrating their shadow. When they finally allowed themselves to access their anger and set real boundaries, the people around them had extreme reactions. Family members who had walked all over them for years suddenly acted shocked. Co-workers who had dismissed them constantly became nervous. Friends who had taken advantage of their generosity got defensive. And here's the part that confused these nice people at first. They weren't being cruel. They weren't being aggressive. They were simply being clear. They were saying no without apologizing. They were calling out disrespect when it happened. They were allowing silence to sit uncomfortably instead of rushing to fill it with nervous chatter. But to people who had grown accustomed to their harmlessness, this felt like a completely different person. The truth is, it was a different person. It was the integrated person, the whole person, the person who could be kind. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. And could be firm, who could be generous, and could be boundaried, who could be understanding, and could be unmoved by manipulation. Now let's talk about something Jung called the psychic smell of victimhood. This is going to sound harsh, but stay with me because understanding this will change your life. Humans, like animals, can smell fear and insecurity, not literally with our noses, but with our unconscious detection systems. We pick up on micro-signals that someone sees themselves as lesser. These signals are everywhere in chronic people-pleasers. They apologize for taking up space. Sorry, can I just squeeze by? When they have every right to walk through a public area. They look down when speaking, as if making eye contact would be presumptuous. They laugh nervously when someone says something uncomfortable, telegraphing that they won't push back. They use qualifiers constantly. I might be wrong, but, or this is probably a stupid question, but, or I don't mean to bother you, but each of these micro-behaviors broadcasts the same message. I see myself as secondary. My needs are less important than yours. I don't deserve to take up space or time or attention. And here's what Jung discovered. When you project that message, other people's unconscious minds agree with you. They start treating you exactly as you're treating yourself. This is what Jung meant by psychological projection, but in reverse. You're not projecting your qualities onto others. You're projecting your self-assessment onto others, and they're accepting it as accurate. If you treat yourself like your opinions don't matter, people will treat your opinions like they don't matter. If you treat yourself like your time is worthless, people will waste your time without guilt. You're teaching them how to treat you with every interaction. Jung documented this phenomenon across hundreds of therapeutic sessions. He noticed a recurring pattern where individuals would come to him complaining about being mistreated. Yet when he observed their behavior, he saw them actively participating in their own diminishment. They would preface every statement with self-deprecation. They would minimize their own achievements while celebrating everyone else's. They would accept blame for things that weren't their fault while refusing to take credit for things that were their doing. What made this pattern so insidious was its invisibility to the person doing it. They had been conditioned so thoroughly to put themselves last that it had become automatic. They weren't consciously choosing to diminish themselves. It was simply how they moved through the world, and every person they encountered received these signals and unconsciously calibrated their treatment accordingly. Jung realized that changing this pattern required more than just deciding to act differently. It required a fundamental shift in how these individuals saw themselves. They had to stop seeing their self-effacement as virtue and start seeing it as self-betrayal. They had to recognize that by constantly putting themselves last, they weren't being noble. They were teaching everyone around them that their needs, feelings, and boundaries didn't matter. The integration of the teeth, that's what Jung called the process of reclaiming your power. It's not about becoming aggressive or cruel. It's about integrating the parts of yourself that can bite if necessary. Consider a composite pattern Jung documented across multiple cases. Individuals who spent decades being the family peacemaker. In narratives like these, they smoothed over every conflict, absorbed everyone's emotional chaos, and never voiced their own needs. When these individuals began setting boundaries through Jungian integration work, their family systems reacted with shock. In these observed dynamics, family members would express feelings of betrayal. The pattern was consistent. Accusations of selfishness, claims that the person had changed fundamentally, expressions of confusion about why they were no longer available for endless emotional labor. And here's the fascinating part. These individuals hadn't done anything extreme. They had simply started saying, "No, I can't do that," without a 5-minute explanation justifying their refusal. They had started letting people's emotions be their own responsibility, instead of rushing to fix everyone's feelings. They had started leaving family gatherings when they wanted to, instead of waiting for permission to have had enough. The family system went into chaos because it had been built on their endless accommodation. When they withdrew that endless supply of emotional labor, the system couldn't function the way it always had. This terrified them at first. They felt guilty. They wondered if they were being cruel. But Jung helped them see something crucial. A boundary is not cruelty. Letting someone experience the consequences of their own behavior is not meanness. Refusing to set yourself on fire to keep others warm is not selfishness. What Jung found particularly interesting was the predictable stages these family systems went through when confronted with this change. First came denial. The family members would act as if nothing had changed and continue making the same demands. When those demands were met with calm refusal, they moved to bargaining, offering conditional approval if the person would just return to their old patterns. When bargaining failed, anger emerged, accusations, guilt trips, and emotional manipulation designed to force compliance. But here's what separated successful integration from failed attempts. The individuals who maintained their boundaries through all these stages eventually reached a breakthrough point. The family system, faced with the reality that the old patterns weren't coming back, had two choices: adapt or lose the relationship. Many chose to adapt. They learned to respect boundaries they had previously trampled. They learned to manage their own emotions instead of outsourcing that work. They learned that relationships could actually be healthier with clear boundaries than without them. This brings us to perhaps the most powerful concept Jung identified: the mechanism of withdrawal. Here's what most people get wrong about standing up for themselves. They think they need to fight back, argue, explain, or defend. They think respect comes from winning verbal battles or proving their point. Jung discovered something far more effective and far more terrifying to disrespectful people. The ultimate power move isn't fighting back. It's withdrawing your attention and validation. Think about what disrespectful people actually want from you. They want your reaction. They want to see you scramble to explain yourself. They want to watch you get flustered or upset. They want you to chase their approval or defend against their criticism. Your reaction is their reward. When you stop providing that reward, everything changes. When someone disrespects you, and you simply look at them calmly, let the silence hang, and then change the subject or walk away, their brain short-circuits. They were expecting the usual pattern. You getting defensive, you apologizing, you trying harder to please them. When that pattern doesn't happen, when you simply withdraw your energy from the interaction without drama or explanation, it creates a psychological void that they don't know how to handle. Jung observed that people who master this technique become almost untouchable. Insults slide off them because they don't engage. Manipulation attempts fail because they don't take the bait. Guilt trips don't work because they don't feel obligated to manage other people's emotions. They've learned to starve disrespectful behavior of the reaction it needs to survive. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. The integrated person can still be warm and generous and kind. The difference is that these qualities now flow from choice rather than fear. They're kind to people who reciprocate and respect them. They're generous with people who value their generosity. They're understanding with people who don't exploit that understanding. And they're completely unmoved by people who try to take advantage. Jung identified what he called the consciousness differential in relationships. This refers to the gap between someone who has done their psychological work and someone who hasn't. When you've integrated your shadow and established clear boundaries, you're operating from a fundamentally different level of awareness than people who are still unconsciously acting out their conditioning. This creates an interesting dynamic. People who haven't done this work will often feel uncomfortable around you without being able to explain why. It's not that you're doing anything to make them uncomfortable. It's that your presence, your groundedness, your refusal to participate in unconscious games acts like a mirror showing them their own patterns. Most people don't like what they see in that mirror, so they either avoid you or try to pull you back down to their level. Jung noticed that integrated individuals attracted two types of people: those who were inspired by their example and wanted to grow, and those who felt threatened and wanted to diminish them. Learning to recognize which type someone was became crucial for protecting your energy and choosing your relationships wisely. So, what does this actually look like in practice? What's the specific moment Jung identified as the turning point? It's simpler and more subtle than you might think. It's the moment you hold eye contact 1 second longer than comfortable when someone disrespects you. It's the moment you stop filling silence with nervous chatter after someone insults you. It's the moment you say no as a complete sentence without a paragraph of justification. Let me walk you through what happens in that moment. Someone makes a dismissive comment about your work, expecting you to laugh it off or defend yourself. Instead, you look directly at them. You don't smile, you don't frown, you don't get visibly angry. You just look at them with calm, steady eye contact. You let 3 seconds of silence pass. Then you say something simple like, "Interesting perspective." Or you say nothing at all and return to what you were doing. In that moment, something shifts in the other person's unconscious mind. They realize, perhaps for the first time, that you're not the person they thought you were. The harmless people pleaser is gone. In their place is someone conscious, someone present, someone who sees exactly what just happened and chose not to reward it with a reaction. Jung called this the blood-run cold effect. The disrespecter feels a chill of uncertainty. They're not sure what you're thinking. They're not sure if they've crossed a line they didn't know existed. They're not sure how to proceed because you've broken the pattern they were counting on. And that uncertainty is where respect begins to grow. This doesn't mean you become rigid or humorless. It doesn't mean you can't laugh at yourself or take a joke. The difference is that now you're choosing when to be gracious, rather than defaulting to it out of fear. You can tell when someone's teasing comes from affection versus when it comes from contempt. And you respond accordingly. The integrated person has access to their full range of responses. They can be gentle when gentleness serves them. They can be firm when firmness is required. They can be warm when warmth is reciprocated. They can be cold when coldness protects their peace. They're not locked into one mode of operation, regardless of how they're being treated. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Respect is not given freely. It's negotiated through every interaction. When you allow disrespect to pass without consequence, you're negotiating a relationship where disrespect is acceptable. When you calmly but clearly indicate that certain behavior is not acceptable, you're negotiating different terms. The beautiful thing is that you don't need to announce this. You don't need to have a confrontational conversation about boundaries. You simply need to embody the shift. Your energy communicates what your words never need to say. People pick up on it immediately, even if they can't consciously explain what changed. Some people will adjust to the new terms. They'll start treating you with more consideration because they realize the old patterns don't work anymore. These are the people worth keeping in your life. Other people will get upset or drift away because they only valued the version of you that they could control or use. Let them go. Their departure is not a loss. It's a filtering system showing you who actually cared about you versus who just enjoyed having someone they could dominate. Jung documented a fascinating phenomenon he called relationship recalibration. When someone undergoes shadow integration and begins establishing boundaries, every relationship in their life gets tested. It's like running all your relationships through a filter that separates authentic connection from exploitative dynamics. In the recalibration process, Jung observed 3 distinct outcomes. First, some relationships deepened and became more genuine. These were connections with people who had always respected you, but perhaps had unconsciously taken advantage of your boundary-less generosity. When you established limits, they appreciated the clarity, and the relationship became more balanced and healthy. Second, some relationships revealed themselves as purely transactional. These people had no interest in you as a person. They were only interested in what they could extract from you. When extraction became impossible, they disappeared. Jung noted that losing these relationships, while painful, was actually a gift. You were finally seeing the truth of what had always been there. Third, some relationships went through a difficult transition period before emerging stronger. These were typically close relationships with people who genuinely cared, but had become accustomed to unhealthy patterns. The transition was uncomfortable for both parties, but if both people were willing to do the work, the relationship could transform into something more authentic and mutually respectful. Jung spent his career studying what separates people who command respect from people who get walked over, and what he found is both simple and profound. The people who get respected are not necessarily smarter, more attractive, or more successful. They're the people who integrated their capacity for power with their capacity for kindness. They're dangerous people who choose to be good, not harmless people who have no choice but to be nice. That's the difference. That's the switch. That's what changes everything. When you integrate your shadow, when you reclaim your teeth, when you stop being harmless and start being powerful but controlled, the shift in how people treat you is immediate and irreversible. They can't unsee the change. They can't go back to treating you like a doormat because they know the doormat is gone. You become someone who can be kind without being weak, someone who can be understanding without being a pushover, someone who can be generous without being exploited, someone who can be calm without being passive. And that combination is what Jung identified as the foundation of genuine self-respect and the respect of others. The most important thing to understand is this: you're not changing who you are. You're becoming who you actually are underneath all the conditioning that taught you to make yourself small. The kind, generous, understanding parts of you are real. But so are the strong, boundaried, self-protective parts. Integration means having access to all of it. Respect is not given. It's negotiated through boundary enforcement, through calm assertion of your value, through the quiet knowledge that you are capable of power, but wise enough to use it selectively. That's the secret Jung discovered. That's the switch you flip by integrating your shadow and showing the world that you're not harmless. You're choosing peace from a position of strength. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.